After Mom died, I whispered something to my dad, and it changed everything. I want you to stay with me till the very end of this story, because what I am about to share isn't just about grief. It's about love, loss, and the way a single whisper can carry the weight of a lifetime. When I tell you that life flipped upside down the day my mom took her last breath, I mean it in the deepest sense. It was like the walls of our home lost their color, the air felt heavier, and the silence had a sound of its own. You know that kind of silence, the one that presses against your chest until it feels like you can't breathe. That's what I lived in. And my dad, he was swallowed whole by it. My dad had always been the strong one. He was never the loudest, never the type to show emotions openly, but you always knew he cared by the little things he did. He'd leave a cup of tea by Mom's side every morning before she even asked. He'd warm up my blanket in the winter before I went to sleep. He wasn't perfect, but his love was steady. And when Mom passed, that steady love cracked. He stopped drinking tea altogether. He stopped opening the curtains. He stopped talking. The man who once hummed old tunes while fixing things around the house now just sat in silence, staring at the empty chair across from him at the dinner table. I felt like I was losing both of them, one to death and one to grief. The night after the funeral, I lay awake listening to the clock tick. Every second was louder than the last, like it was counting down to something I wasn't ready for. I got up and walked down the hallway. The house smelled faintly of Mom's perfume, soft, floral, comforting, but now it only reminded me of the fact that she wasn't there. I found Dad sitting in the living room, the lights off, only the dim glow of the streetlight slipping through the curtains. He was holding one of Mom's scarves, clutching it as if letting go would mean losing her all over again. I stood there, frozen, watching him. He didn't even notice me. His shoulders shook, and for the first time in my life, I realized my dad was crying. Real tears, silent but unstoppable, falling down his face. It broke me, because I had always believed dads weren't supposed to cry. But there he was, my dad, the strongest man I knew, completely shattered. And that's when I whispered something that came straight from the ache in my chest. Words I didn't even plan. I just said, "Dad, she wouldn't want us to lose each other too." It was soft, almost swallowed by the silence, but he heard me. He looked up, his eyes red, his face tired, and for a moment, something changed. His grip on the scarf loosened, his breathing steadied. It wasn't magic, it didn't fix everything, but it planted a seed. You see, grief has a way of making people close the door to their hearts. My dad had locked himself in his pain, but those words cracked it open, just enough for light to slip through. From that night on, things didn't suddenly become perfect, but they became different. He started talking again, slowly at first. He'd ask if I'd eaten. He'd tell me to lock the door before bed. They were small things, but small things matter when you've been surrounded by silence. Days passed, and we began learning how to live in a world without her. I won't lie to you, it wasn't easy. Every corner of the house reminded us of her. The way the cushions were still slightly indented where she used to sit. The smell of her cooking that seemed to live in the walls. Even the garden outside, where her favorite flowers bloomed, felt like a cruel reminder. But that whisper that first gave him it stayed with him. I could tell. He repeated it once when he thought I wasn't listening. He whispered, "She wouldn't want me to lose you." Hearing that nearly brought me to my knees, because it wasn't just me who needed him. He needed me to. And here's where the real change began. We started cooking together. At first it was just boiling rice or frying an egg because neither of us knew Mom's recipes the way she did. But eventually, we opened her old recipe book. Her handwriting was all over it. Notes like "add a pinch more salt" or "don't forget, he doesn't like too much spice." Reading her words out loud while cooking felt like inviting her back into the room. My dad and I burned a few dinners, laughed at our own failures, and sometimes cried quietly while stirring the pot. But we were doing it together. Every Sunday, we'd sit by the garden and water her flowers. He'd tell me stories about how they met, how he used to wait for her outside her workplace just to walk her home, how nervous he was when he first held her hand. I had never heard these stories before. It was like he had kept them locked away until grief forced them out. And in those moments, I didn't just see him as my dad. I saw him as a man who had loved deeply and lost profoundly. One night, weeks later, I whispered something else. I said, "Dad, what do you think Mom would say if she saw us now?" He paused, his lips trembling, and then he said, "She'd tell us to keep going. She'd tell me not to waste the time I still have with you." And then he added something that made me realize how much he had changed. and she'd probably tell me to stop burning the curry. We both laughed, and it was the first real laugh that filled our house since she left. From then on, my dad wasn't just surviving, he was living again. He started humming those old tunes when fixing things around the house. He began drinking tea again, but now he'd always make a second cup for me. He even started opening the curtains in the morning, letting the light in, and all of this, because of a whisper. It taught me something powerful. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes, it comes from a quiet voice in the middle of the night, reminding someone they're not alone. Months turned into years, and while we never stopped missing Mom, we learned to carry her with us in everything we did. We kept her alive in stories, in recipes, in laughter, and in the silence too. Looking back, I realized that whisper didn't just change him, it changed me too. It made me stronger. It showed me the power of love, even in the darkest moments, and it reminded me that no matter how heavy the loss, we don't have to carry it alone. So if you're watching this, I want you to remember, sometimes the smallest words can carry the greatest weight. Don't be afraid to say them. Don't be afraid to reach out. You never know when your whisper might save someone you love. Stay till the very end of this story, because what I'm about to say is important. When life takes away someone you thought you couldn't live without, you have two choices. Close off your heart or open it wider. My dad chose to open his, and I chose to whisper, instead of staying silent. That whisper changed everything. And I promise you, yours can too. So, hold your loved ones close. Tell them what you feel while you still can. And if the silence feels unbearable, don't be afraid to break it with a whisper, because sometimes, one whisper can change everything. Watch till the end, because your story of healing might just begin with a single word. If this story touched you, remember, one whisper can change a life, maybe even yours.